A father throws his daughter into the sea to die, but before she drowns, something incredible happens. 8-year-old Linda had always felt a bitter loneliness at home, especially after Ruth, her stepmother, came into her life. Her home, once a place of safety, had become a battlefield. Ruth's harsh words echoed through the house, each one cutting deeper than the last. Her father, Mason, who had once protected her, now seemed distant, lost in a cloud of confusion and avoidance. One night, as Linda hid in the shadows of the staircase, she overheard Ruth issuing an ultimatum. Either Mason got rid of Linda, or their marriage was over. The words were like knives to Linda's small heart, but what truly broke her was Mason's faltering agreement. The man she adored was choosing Ruth over her. That night, as tears soaked her pillow, Linda didn't realize the depth of the betrayal that awaited her. The next evening, Mason invited her for a boat ride, something that sparked a glimmer of hope in her fragile heart. Maybe, she thought, her father was trying to mend their bond. But as the boat ventured farther into the cold, dark sea, Linda's unease grew. Mason's silence became unbearable, and when she questioned him, his guilt-ridden face told her all she needed to know. In a moment of despair and cowardice, he stood, grabbed her by the arms, and threw her into the icy water. Linda's screams pierced the night, but Mason, consumed by guilt and fear, rowed away, leaving her to the mercy of the sea. Linda struggled against the freezing water, her small arms thrashing desperately as her strength waned. Just as the darkness began to swallow her, a light appeared in the distance, a fishing boat. Joe, a simple fisherman, spotted her and raced to her rescue. Pulling her aboard, he wrapped her in a blanket, speaking soothing words to calm her shivering, terrified frame. Back at his cabin, Joe tended to Linda with quiet compassion, offering her the safety and care she had so desperately lacked. Over the following days, Linda began to heal in Joe's warm, rustic home. The village embraced her with kindness, and Joe became a father figure she could trust. Slowly, the nightmares of that fateful night gave way to a fragile hope. One day, as they sat by the sea, Joe shared his own painful story of losing a daughter years ago, a wound that had never truly healed. Saving Linda, he said, felt like a second chance, a chance to make up for what he had lost. Their shared pain forged a deep bond, each finding solace in the other. Just as Linda began to rebuild her life, the past caught up with her. While walking in the village square, she froze in place as a familiar figure emerged from the crowd. It was Mason, her father, his face a mix of desperation and regret. The danger she thought she had escaped now stood before her, threatening to shatter the fragile peace she had found. Mason arrived at the village at 9:05 p.m., visibly worn, unshaven, and carrying an empty look as if the weight of the world had collapsed upon him. Linda froze at the sight, overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions. Fear, anger, and the haunting memory of the night he had thrown her into the sea. She could scarcely believe his audacity to show up after everything he had done. Mason, on the other hand, was desperate, cast out by Ruth, who had betrayed him without remorse. He was now alone, aimless, and consumed by guilt. His mind fixated on Linda, the daughter he had wronged, and the weight of his actions was destroying him. As they stood facing each other, Mason was a shadow of the man he once was. His eyes searched Linda's, pleading silently for a glimmer of understanding. "Linda," he whispered hoarsely, but she instinctively stepped back, her face contorted with pain and fear. The sight of him brought back the terror of the sea and the belief that he might have returned to finish what he had started. Panic surged through her, and she shouted, "No!" Her voice echoed through the quiet village as she turned and ran, not daring to look back. Mason called after her, his voice breaking with despair. "Please, Linda, listen to me." But his words fell on deaf ears. To Linda, he was not a man seeking redemption, but a lingering danger she had hoped to leave behind. From a distance, Joe, returning from a fishing trip, saw the scene. Concerned, he followed Linda's cries and found her trembling, hiding behind one of the cabins. "What happened?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. Linda, through her tears, managed to utter one word, Mason. Joe immediately understood. He knew Mason's story. The man who had nearly destroyed his daughter's life and now sought forgiveness. Joe held Linda gently, reassuring her, "You're safe. I'm here." His presence gave her a momentary reprieve. Mason hesitated before approaching, knowing his presence was unwelcome, but determined to face the consequences of his actions. Joe turned to him with a hard, unyielding gaze. "What do you want here, Mason?" he demanded. Mason swallowed his fear, his voice faltering as he replied, "I came for Linda. I know what I did was wrong, and I don't deserve anything from her. But I need her forgiveness." His desperation was evident, but Joe remained cautious. He watched Mason closely, analyzing his every word and movement. Meanwhile, Linda's heart raced as she struggled to process the situation. Mason's plea struck a chord, but Linda's anger and fear were still raw. "I can't forgive you," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. Her words cut through the night like a blade, and Mason's expression contorted with pain. Joe, ever the voice of reason, intervened. "Linda, you don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But sometimes, forgiveness isn't for the other person. It's for you." His words lingered, offering a perspective that both Linda and Mason couldn't ignore. The village, with its quiet streets and constant rhythm of the sea, became a stage for a story of redemption, resilience, and healing. Forgiveness, it seemed, wasn't just a path for Linda to find peace, but also a chance for Mason to rebuild the broken bonds of family. And while the journey was fraught with pain and uncertainty, it was also filled with hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, the seeds of redemption could take root. Linda couldn't sleep that night. Joe's words echoed in her mind, intertwining with the memories of her father, the man who had once protected her and later betrayed her so deeply. The scars of that betrayal were etched into her heart, and yet Mason's brokenness stirred something she couldn't ignore. By morning, the decision was still unclear, but Linda knew she needed time to think. She walked to the beach, letting the cool breeze and rhythmic waves calm her restless thoughts. The ocean, once a symbol of fear and pain, now seemed to offer clarity. Sitting on the sand, she whispered to herself, "If I hold on to this anger, will it help me heal, or will it keep me trapped?" When Linda returned to the village, she found Mason sitting on the shore, staring at the horizon. His figure seemed smaller, weighed down by guilt and regret. Tentatively, she approached him, her steps cautious. Mason looked up, startled but hopeful. He stood but made no move toward her, giving her space. "Dad," Linda said softly, her voice breaking the silence. Mason's eyes filled with tears as he heard the word he thought he might never hear again. "I don't know if I can ever forget what you did," she continued, her voice trembling. "But I'm tired of carrying this pain. It's exhausting." Mason nodded, his own voice cracking. "Linda, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know how sorry I am, how much I wish I could undo what I've done. If there's anything I can do to make this right, I'll do it. Anything." Linda looked into his eyes, seeing the regret and sincerity that had been missing for so long. She took a deep breath. "I forgive you, Dad," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But it's not for you. It's for me. I need to move on. I need to let this go." Mason broke down, falling to his knees in the sand. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, Linda. I don't deserve it, but I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that I can be better." From that day forward, Mason worked tirelessly to rebuild his relationship with Linda. He stayed in the village working with Joe in the fishing trade. Though Joe remained protective of Linda, he saw Mason's efforts and began to let his guard down. The two men forged an unlikely friendship, bonded by their shared care for Linda. For Linda, healing wasn't immediate. There were days when the memories of that fateful night haunted her, and trust came slowly. But with time, she began to see glimpses of the father she had once adored. Mason's presence in her life became less a source of fear and more a testament to the power of change. The village embraced them as a family, offering kindness and support. Neighbors greeted Linda with warm smiles, and Mason earned their respect through his dedication and humility. Joe, the steadfast figure in Linda's life, remained by her side, his wisdom and quiet strength a constant comfort. One evening, as the three of them sat on the porch of Joe's house, watching the sun set over the ocean, Linda felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined her. She looked at Joe and Mason, two men who had become her family in the most unexpected way, and smiled. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. "For everything." Mason and Joe exchanged a glance, their bond strengthened by their shared commitment to Linda's happiness. In that moment, they knew that while the road ahead would have its challenges, they had found something rare and precious, a chance to heal together. The waves rolled gently onto the shore, the ocean a constant reminder of the past and a symbol of the endless possibilities of the future. And in that seaside village, where pain had once reigned, a new story of love, forgiveness, and redemption began to unfold.